And we're not talking about faith as a religion today. We're not talking about faith in that way. Many of you have already begun to unpack what it is that we are looking at faith in that way today. And let's start with the definition so that we're all on the same page. How does that sound to you? Yeah. All right. And let's start with Ernest Holmes' definition. How does that sound? Yeah. All right. So Ernest Holmes' definition of faith on page 591.5 of the Science of Mind text, he says, faith is a mental attitude. Faith is a mental attitude so inwardly embodied that the mind can no longer deny it. Faith is complete when both the conscious mind and when there is both conscious mind and subjective acceptance. Faith can be consciously generated. In spiritual terminology, faith means a belief in the presence of an invisible principle and law which directly and specifically responds to us. You got all that?
No.
There's going to be a test later. I'm going to ask you to define faith. You're just going to write it out. Good? Yeah. All right. So let's break it down, shall we? So first of all, faith is a mental attitude. So inwardly embodied, meaning that your faith is an attitude that is so inwardly embodied in your body, within your body, that your mind cannot deny it. In other words, you have so embodied the idea, you so embodied the belief, you so embodied the thought, that it is so internal that your mind cannot deny it, your mind cannot say anything against it, your mind cannot poo-poo it. It is so embodied that it cannot be denied. And then faith is complete. A complete faith is when there is both a conscious, meaning an awake, aware conscious, and a subjective, meaning subconscious, acceptance of it. Meaning that your faith is now your operating system, because your subjective mind, as Ernest Holmes talks about, your subjective mind is actually what your subconscious mind, and so that becomes your operating system in your life. So that when you have the thoughts, the ideas, the beliefs, what you're predominantly believing, thinking, and doing and moving in your life is based on what you have accepted as your truth, or what you have accepted and believed most consistently, that it has become subjective, so that you're just operating on autopilot, right? Which is why the CHP can pull you over, because you're just operating on autopilot. Don't! I love having my people here so I can tease and play with them, right? So that subjective mind is when we are operating on autopilot. It's how we get through the majority of our day, because did you know that you're making over 35,000 decisions every single day? 35,000 single decisions every single day. Can you imagine if you had to stop and actually consciously think about 35,000 decisions a day? You would be exhausted. Right? You wouldn't be able to do anything. Exactly. So the subjective works in our favor, but the subjective, when we have the faith, faith becomes the subjective rather than fear becoming the subjective, then we move forward with a changed life. So faith may be consciously generated, and as Ernest says, in spiritual terminology, faith means a belief in the presence of an invisible principle and law which directly and specifically responds to us. So an invisible principle and law which directly and specifically responds to us. So what is this law?
Law of faith.
Law of faith. The creative process. We know the creative process? Yes? No? Okay. Backing up. So, creative process. So, the V up here, right?
Yes.
Creative process? Still not ringing the bell. Cool, that's all right. Spirit, mind, body. Spirit, mind, body, right? So, we put an idea, spirit, we have an idea, we put it in the mind, the creative medium of soil, and then that becomes form, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, the creative process, meaning the law, the creative process, the law works all the time. When we change our thinking, we change our life. So, we put an idea, we have an idea, we plant it into that creative medium, and then we get the plant, we get what it is that we put into the creative medium. Now we're on the same page again?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So we know that happens, correct?
Yes.
We have a faith in that. We know that this is the way it works. We know that the way that this is the universe works. We know the way that this is the way that life works. We know that this is the way spirit works. That when there is an idea, it is placed into that creative medium, which is called the law, and then the law does what the law does. It is an irrespective of persons. It doesn't care who uses the law or how the law is used, but whatever is placed into the law, into the creative medium, is then what we see in form. Law of cause and effect, law of attraction, we know these words, right? Okay, so this law responds directly to each of us. So this is what we have faith in. We have faith in knowing that the law always works. Okay? Good?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So, in order to have faith, we must have a conviction that all is well. And so if in order to have a conviction that all is well, we have to know that spirit is all there is. God is all there is. This one life is all there is. There is no other. There is nothing opposed to it or standing against it. There is simply one power, one presence, one life, one love. Only one. There is not two, there's only one. So that is having a conviction that all is well, because if spirit is all there is, and I am one with it, you are one with it, we are all one with spirit. All of life is a divine emanation and impartation of this one life, which we call spirit. Then all has to be well. There cannot be anything wrong or anything against spirit. So then, in order to keep the faith, which is today's talk title, in order to keep the faith, we must allow nothing to enter into our thought which will weaken the conviction. Faith is built up by belief, acceptance, and trust. And so whenever anything enters our thought, which destroys in any degree belief, acceptance, or trust, to that extent, our faith is weakened. So if we allow an errant thought, if we allow an errant acceptance, if we allow an errant belief to enter our awareness, to enter our consciousness, and we actually start to believe in that, we diminish our faith. Faith gets diminished. And what is one of the things that faith is diminished by? What is one of the things that weakens faith? Fear. Right on. Right on, Yucca Valley. Fear. Fear. And Ernest says that fear is nothing more than a negative take on faith. Fear is nothing more than faith misplaced. Fear is actually a belief in two powers instead of one. A belief that there can be a power opposed to God whose influence may have the ability to bring us about evil. Right? Now, I woke up this morning and my hair had a mind of its own, and I had two little tufts of hair sticking up. So it's kind of cute. But I had to tamp down my horns there and do my due for you here. But there is not a power opposed to spirit. There cannot be. Spirit is all that there is. There is only one power. So it is our belief in two powers. It is our belief in other that is opposed to spirit. It is our belief in other, that my neighbor is not me, is not my brother, is not my sister, is not my sibling. That is the belief, right, that causes fear. And it is a false belief because it's a belief in two. It's a belief in other. And so we've been living in this cesspool of fear for far too long that we are seeing our neighbors, we're seeing our friends, we're seeing our family, we're seeing our country and people in our country as other. And so we have been living in this fear. And so how do we counteract all of this fear?
Faith.
Faith. We come back to faith. We come back to our oneness. We come back to the unity. And remember that all is one and all is well.
It's the other side speaking.
It is. So the reason we suffer, my beloveds, is because we are not in both conscious and subjective communication with the affirmative side of the universe. Our suffering, our experience of fear, is because we are not in both conscious and subjective communication with the affirmative side of the universe. And because we fail to realize that principle is not bound by precedent, right? Because we fail to realize that principle is not bound by precedent, we limit our faith to that which we have already accomplished, and thus few miracles result. So we limit our faith. How many of you have limited your faith? Right? Yeah. We limit our faith based on what we already know to be true, based on what we already know to have happened, based upon the past. We limit it based on our experiences, and because we have limited our experiences and we have limited our faith, then the greater possibilities are not possible because we have limited ourselves. So it is our belief, our trust, our acceptance, which builds our faith, which allows us to continue to grow, continue to expand, continue to move forward in oneness, in unity, and wholeness. But we have to remember to come back to faith. Ernest Holmes says on page 158, for those of you who like to jot down citations, because I know that there are some of you. Joe. So, I've already gotten to know you. So, Ernest Holmes says, "We are not going through a harder time today, a longer or darker night, than has ever been experienced before. It only seems that way because we have lost faith, the beacon of light." The beacon of light. If one will have faith in themselves, faith in their fellow people, in the universe and in God, in spirit, that faith will light the place in which they find themselves. And by the light of this faith, they will be able to see that all is good. And the light shed by this faith will light the way for others. We become conscious of the darkness only when we are without faith. For faith is ever the light of our day and the light on our way, making that way clearly visible to us, even when to all others it may be beset with obstacles and the ongoing challenges. If we are to have, he goes on to say, if we are to have an active faith, the faith of God, instead of merely a faith in God, our thought must be centered in the universal mind. We are convinced that under divine law, all things are possible if only we believe and work in conformity with the principles of that law. And you heard Joe read the principles, our declaration of principles, the what we believe statements. You heard him read that earlier. Such a faith does not spring full-orbed into being, but grows by knowledge and acceptance. No matter the outside appearance, we must cling steadfastly to the knowledge that God is good, and God is all, underneath all, above all, and round about all. And so it is.
one more time. I don't know about you guys, but